Have you ever wanted to be able to repeatedly execute successful launches? Well, if so, then what I'm going to talk to you about today is exactly what you're looking for. Hi and welcome. I'm Andrew Hatfield. I'm the head of cloud strategy in NetApp for the Cloud Services Business Unit. And today I'm honored to be speaking at the Winter Olympics. Although truth be told, I'm based in Brisbane, Australia, and it is summer here right now. And it is hot, sticky and humid. And I would give just about anything to be in the snow. Right, so just like a really quick overview about me. I've worked in large companies, Fortune 500, listed companies, startups, and I've either led or been a key team member in over 12 successful launches and many more releases. And we'll cover the difference as we go on. Personally, I've sold over $200 million of software, most of it free open source, and contributed and built over 1.3 billion in qualified pipeline. So these techniques do work, and you can see a couple of the different companies that I've worked for there. So let's get right into it, shall we? I think it's safe to say that pretty much every product marketer wants to see that hockey stick growth, right? Like it starts small and then boom, right? Up and to the right. Now, the launch is important to helping you get there. But I think it's even more important, and before we begin, let's just cover this off, right? There is so much emphasis put on the launch. However, I think it's worth saying that while there's a whole heap of stuff that comes before the launch, there's also a whole heap of things that come after the launch, and you are going to have many, many, many launches. So rather than thinking of the launch, think of it as simply an event along your roadmap of growth. All right, let's just reiterate that. The launch is just an event, right? It's not the be all and end all. Stuff comes before, stuff comes after. It's a cycle. So the first thing that I always want to know when we're discussing launches, whether it's for companies I work with or organizations I consult with, is why are we doing one? Like, what is the purpose, right? And there are many different reasons that we might launch something, and we'll get into the something shortly. But is it product market fit? Are we announcing a new product, right? Or are we, is it a soft launch? Most common type of launch is we actually want to drive revenue. We want to acquire customers and grow. Conversely, it could be that for those customers we're wanting to grow our share of wallet. It might be an additional product or an uplift, or we're wanting to grow our base, like that land and expand. It could be more of a branding exercise, like awareness or reputation. Potentially, from an awareness perspective, you're entering a new market or a sub-market, right? As April Dunford talks about in positioning with, big fish, little pond. Or it could be, a reputational thing, like perhaps you've launched a new corporate social responsibility initiative, or you're contributing to a charity or some local initiative in your environment or community. Right? These are all valid reasons as to why you would have a launch, but it's critically important to understand why you're doing a launch, because that then drives what your goals are, and that helps inform you as to what metrics you should be measuring so that you can identify, was this launch successful? Because in the end, all this activity is just busy work unless it actually gets us our result. All right? So what is it we're launching? The most common, especially in B2B and startup and software, in particular with this massive rise of SaaS, is some form of product or secondarily a service. Right? I think everyone kind of gets that, but you could also have a launch for a partnership, whether that's go to market or your distribution channel. Maybe it's a supplier, right? Maybe there's some value in informing the market or your customers, or you're sending a signal as to why this partnership is critically or strategically important to your organization and your customers. Perhaps you're launching a company or relaunching, as I've done, which was a lot of work, but I have to say was a lot of fun, like relaunching a Series D in San Francisco a couple of years ago. Heaps of fun, right? But let's say you're a startup and you're coming out of stealth, right? Maybe you've announced seed funding or Series A, and it's like the party is on, right? So launching a company is sometimes for a startup very similar to launching the product, because often the go-to-market is one and the same, but not always, right? Especially in multi-product organizations. It's also important to understand that not every launch is equal. Now, what do I mean by that? Right? Well, there's different things that will be involved in your launch. So let's say, for sake of argument, you're launching a product, either a new product, it's a new release, or there's a significant uplift or new version or something. Now, when we look at this matrix and we see, are we trying to acquire new customers by doing something that's new and innovative? That's obviously number one priority, right? That is something we really want to make a lot of noise about. But if we're just having something new and innovative to keep our customers, or we're doing something to acquire new customers, but it's kind of meeting the market, like they're table stakes or we've played catch up, that's kind of like what I like to think of as like a run rate launch. As I foreshadowed earlier, perhaps this is where we think of things as a release, not so much a launch. Right? Our mentality and the way we feel and think about these things does make a difference. And then if all we're doing is meeting the market and keeping customers, like that really is, priority number 3. If we think about that, jobs to be done, urgent, important, not important, not saying we don't do a priority 3, but when we're thinking about the level of effort that we go to, all the people we bring together, how much noise we want to make, obviously, the things that are in the top right, where it's new and innovative and we're acquiring new customers, that's what we really want to focus on, right? That is what is going to drive that hockey stick growth up and to the right. All right, now, when we're thinking about, okay, I've got these different priorities. Let's say my launch, it's new and innovative, it's designed to get new customers, so it's priority 1. Well, what does that actually look like? Now, you can see here on the right, there's an example list. Now, these are by no means exhaustive. They're simply like a bit of a guide to give you an idea of, well, if I'm just making an announcement, do I really need to go and do press? Or do I need to go and do a social campaign? Or do I need to do advertising and paid, whether that's digital or physical? But if I am making like this big noise, then I should probably do a whole heap more. Now, what I think is important is every organization is going to be different. Every product is going to be different. Now, yes, there are going to be similarities, but look at this list and just tailor it, right? Now, there'll be some times where you just don't have the funds to go and do PR. That's okay. Maybe you can go and do it only with social, or you can reach out to your customers and see if they can help amplify and promote your messaging. But what's really important is knowing, depending on the type of launch, what activities that you have. Because additionally, the amount of work you've got to do informs how long you have between the decision to do a launch and the date of the launch, right? There's only so many things you can do. And obviously your team size, your company size, and your budget all feed into these questions. So executing the launch. The very first thing you want to do is identify all of your stakeholders. Now, at a minimum, you're going to have product. Now, in a software company, you probably want to have engineering as well. Now, depending on your company or your organization, maybe product speaks for engineering in this regard. Leave that to you. I've always personally found it's great to get direct from engineering's mouth. That way there is no confusion and you don't end up, you've done a launch or you're like right before the let's go button and your engineering manager or VP of engineering says, whoa, we didn't know about this. That's not ready. Like, no, product is incorrect. That feature hasn't shipped, right? So better be safe than sorry. And as product marketers, this is what we do all day, every day, right? Like we're bringing together different groups of people. So definitely product. I personally recommend having engineering, sales, customer success or support, your broader marketing team. I've also always included people like legal if we have in-house counsel, right? Just little checklists. The earlier that you can involve someone and give them the yay or nay as to whether or not they need to be involved, the better. You don't want to leave your launch to the day before and all of a sudden legal comes up and says, hey, you've exposed us to massive liability. You can't do this. When this could have been easily avoided if you just explained what the limit of that liability is or what the wording means, or maybe it's just changing that wording, right? So better be safe than sorry, get in early. And we want to work out, okay, all of these things that we've decided, whether it's priority 1, 2, or 3, how long are they going to take? And be realistic. It always takes, finger in the air, double what you think, unless you are a well-oiled machine. And I'm yet to meet that company. There's always something, right? And so obviously you need review, you need drafts, you need copywriting, maybe you need design. Take into account, like, depending on the time of year, people's availability, maybe they're on leave. If you need external resources, say like graphic design, or you need a production house, what's their lead time? Like, this is project management. Managing a launch is not complex, but it's involved, right? It's definitely a comprehensive job. And it's not for the light of heart, right? It's not hard, it's just a lot, right? Especially for priority 1, right? Then you've got your timeline, like when do these things need to occur? And just simple things like, like we're professionals. Hey, Ralph, you said that, you were okay with, the 13th for this. Just checking that that's a week away, how you're tracking, right? Just keep on top of things. And then there's things like timeline, right? So it's not just, how long it takes to do things and, the lead time for that. But what else is going on, right? You don't want to be gazumped by an industry event or something that is like everyone knows about, like a public holiday, a religious observance, right? Let's say there's like the big game is on. You probably don't want to be launching something at the Super Bowl unless you've paid for advertising at the Super Bowl, unless your goal is to not actually be noticed, right? Which tends not to be the case. So, be aware, like have a calendar of events that are relevant to your market, and not just your users and customers, but your geographies as well, right? Like if you're launching something in North America, but you're a European company, then, timely for this time of year, North America, celebrates Thanksgiving. Europe doesn't. So being aware of things like that, right? Simple, but could derail you if you miss it, right? And then being aware of other conversations that are happening. Now, the most common fail is when someone tries to be clever with like a hashtag campaign in social and it just gets away from them. Or let's say you've got it's a guilty pleasure, like you're launching a new chocolate bar and a big court case has come out and the person's not guilty. Right, so there's been situations where that organization, through no fault of their own, like just this really was bad timing, right? They just got slammed. So you need to be very careful about how you're doing things and what other conversations are happening. So be careful with that. This really does, like if you've got a digital media or like a social media person, have them out there. Make sure you're listening, you're getting feedback from the field or your partners. Like, just make sure that you're not tone deaf. And then one thing that I love this slide, get your ducks in a row before you go, right? Like you need a go or no go call, right? There's a date, there's a time, everybody knows it, and it is very clear who has go and no go ability, right? Let's say, for example, you must have a go from at least sales, product, and marketing before you can actually hit the button and launch. Right? I've found that really helpful. It gets people bought into the process that maybe like, hey, I don't care about that. That's marketing's job. No. Your sales team, head of sales, are going to get questions about this because we're doing our job. You're going to get inquiries. They need to be enabled. Are you comfortable that your team know what they're talking about? Are you confident that we have enabled them and given your sales teams the right information and they know this? And if the answer is no, well, maybe you don't launch, right? These are hard calls, But it is far better to be on the money and successful than it is to miss a key, really simple, honestly, piece of the puzzle, right? Because what you don't want to happen is you've done this amazing job. There's this buzz, it's viral, and this big whale that you've been wanting to land picks up the phone and calls your salesperson, and your rep goes, I don't know about that. Boom, right? Now, probably you're not going to lose the deal. But what if you did, and it's just because something as simple as this? So, have a list. Have everyone agree that the list is who has final say, right? You need 3 out of 5. You must have legal, sales, and marketing, or whoever it is for your organization. Be very clear. And before you hit that button, the big red launch button, you've got written confirmation from everybody. Now, we all do our best, and we all hope for the best. But I think it's important to understand that things go wrong. And look, that sucks. It's terrible. We don't want it to go wrong. But it is okay, depending on what it is, obviously, right? There's a caveat there. Now, what really smart product marketing teams are prepared for is things going wrong. It's a bit like there's known knowns and there's known unknowns and there's unknown unknowns, right? Have a list of, okay, when we launch this, we expect these 3 outcomes, right? It's kind of a bit like chess, right? Like, it is our job to be strategic here, especially in a competitive market, right? Being able to think ahead and say, well, what are our competitors going to do or say in response, and be prepared. You don't want to get flat-footed, right? That is bad. Like, that is us not having done our job, right? So be prepared. Like, what are the likely outcomes that's going to occur during and post this launch, right? What hard questions do we expect to get from industry media or from analysts, right? What are our competitors going to say? Like, they're probably going to have a FUD campaign that they hastily put together. Be prepared. Now, if something goes wrong, that's okay, right? So there's that thinking ahead side of things. But then there's things that, okay, well, let's say the worst case scenario happens and we get caught up in some negative news story that's completely unrelated, but has the risk of tarnishing our brand, and we don't want to be involved, right? So at what point do we say, you know what, let's just pull it, right? And how do we pull it? Like, how do we roll it back? It's a bit like in technology, right? I'm deploying a new release of software. I'm launching a new product. They sound, they're similar, right? Right? So what happens if it goes wrong? How can I pull back, right? Can I quickly go and pull the blog articles? Can I delete the social media posts? Can I roll back my web copy changes, right? Do I have some media prepared to say, hey, look, we've delayed this because, right? So being aware of your surroundings is critically important, and knowing at what point would it justify us rolling this back? And what would that look like? Do we go all the way back to where we were, pre-launch? Do we just go back a little bit? Like, who makes that call? At what point do they make that call? How far back is that call go? So just being prepared, right? I think that's the synthesis of this point. Now, as we discussed at the beginning, you want to be able to clearly identify what your goals for this launch are. Because otherwise, like, what's the point in having the launch if you don't have a goal? Like, it's just a lot of work for no measurable benefit, right? So what are those metrics, right? So from that goal, we've defined we want this many qualified leads, we want this many demos, or we want this many sales conversations, or we want this much qualified pipeline that we can track back. Now, notice I didn't say attribute, because that's a whole other story that's kind of broken in demand gen. But how can we say that this campaign influenced revenue, right? Because that's what we actually care about in the majority of these launches, right? Is bringing money in, right? Marketing's goal is not to exceed the number of new leads and their goals, while sales misses their revenue number. Like, that's just silly, right? It seems common sense when we say it, but so many times we see that, hey, we brought in so many SROs. Well, what's an SRO? It's a sales ready opportunity. And then when you talk to sales, they go, they just filled out a form for an ebook, right? So measuring the right benefits, so measuring the right metrics is critically important. But now that we've done that, right, beforehand, we want to have gone through this exercise of saying, okay, well, if these are the metrics that we care about, what do we think the investment that we're going to make in this launch will produce, right? And the first time you do this, it's going to be fuzzy. It might just be a guess, right? But have a guess, right? And then at the end of the launch, let's say it's a hot and fast launch, and so you're measuring it on the day. You probably also want to, like, whatever your sales cycle is, measure it in the middle of that cycle and at the end of that cycle, and then 50% beyond that as well, just so you can track, like, how did this launch perform over time, and look at the cumulative results that you're getting. And how far away from your estimates were you, right? The closer you are, the better you are, right, at estimating those. So it makes it easier when you're then asking for resources or budget, or when you need to defend why you've made decisions. Say, well, look, the results we got match what we estimated because we got those resources this time. Or conversely, look, we missed this metric because we didn't do task X, right? We couldn't do that because we didn't have budget to bring on a designer, or to engage a media company, or PR, right? So the more informed and data-centric our feedback is, the better, right? That's us as product marketers, right? So what worked well? What do we want to do next time? What do we want to double down on? Simple things. Did we miss, meet, or exceed those goals, right? What could we do better next time? So I said this was the 6 keys to a successful launch, but if you were counting, you would have noticed that there was a bonus one. So what I'll say is this is by no means prescriptive, but I've found using this as a framework consistently delivers better than average results, certainly compared to previous launches, before I was involved, where maybe a less experienced person was running them, or maybe there's no one key person. And perhaps that's the most important thing. You need a quarterback, you need a captain, like whatever sporting analogy resonates with you. You need one person that's making the call on how to run the launch, right? Now, they aren't necessarily going to decide everything, but they're the one that is coordinating everything. So obviously, and the number one thing that we care about is, why are we doing this launch in the first place? What is it that we're launching? How do we prioritize that launch, right? Is it a priority 1? We're going after new customer acquisition because we're doing something new and innovative. Priority 1, down to a release, or maybe it's just like an announcement in P3. What timeline do we have between now and when we want to launch? And who needs to sign off on the go or no go? What happens when something goes wrong? And how do we go and get some learnings from what we did? So hopefully this is helpful for you. My details are down the bottom, or you can reach out on LinkedIn or Twitter. Please feel free, ask questions. Happy to help. And hope you enjoy the rest of the Winter Games. Cheers.